Guys, welcome back. So today we want to talk about the NGSW program, the SIG M7, and talk about some misinformation that's been circulated on the internet regarding the new weapon system program by the U.S. Army. We have Jason with us today, joining us in studio. And this whole discussion is based upon the Army Times article written by an author by the name of Alan Orr. Now, before we get started with today's video, we'd like to invite you to come over and check out Second Legacy. It's a brand new channel, and I'm working with Braden from Langley Outdoors Academy, and we're talking about current events, stuff that affects the Second Amendment. So please check out the link in the video description below. Swing by and check out the Second Legacy, and we look forward to seeing you over there. All right. Also, I'd like to preface this conversation by saying we do expect a statement from SIG. Hopefully, we'll get that before we go into post-production, that we're going to share their statement into this video for you guys to check out. Our commentary today is going to be centered around the Army Times article and information that I've been able to get from insider industry sources regarding some of the comments that were made in this article. And then some of it's just going to be pure conjecture that we're going to share our perspective on, because a lot of the stuff that's claimed in this article is apparently coming from, I don't know, feelings, not necessarily so much fact.
Right.
So with that being said, we'll just go through this article, basically paragraph by paragraph, and share our thoughts with what the author has to say. I do want to say that it just seems like the internet's purposely got this wrong. When you read this article and contrast it with the stuff that's been posted on the internet that cites this article either publicly or doesn't cite it, but this is the source of the information, somehow they've twisted it and gotten it even more wrong than this article.
I know. In
many areas. So, all right. So on the first paragraph, basically it talks about, and I'll link to this down below. It talks about the M7, basically on all key technical measures, the Next Generation Squad Weapons Program, the NGSW, is imploding before the Army's very eyes. The program is on mechanical life support. Based on what? Right?
That's, that first paragraph, we're not even done with it, but they're already starting off hot and heavy.
Right.
With, the first paragraph being calling it dead. It's dead. It's on life support. Might as well pull the plug, and quit lingering along here.
According to the internet, the plug's been pulled.
Yeah,
so people have taken this statement of it's on mechanical life support, whatever that means. Life support, mechanical life support. What's the difference? But anyway, it's on mechanical life support and it's pending destruction. But the internet has taken this statement and turn it into, it's failed and it's been canceled. If you take a look at our most recent M7 video where we're out shooting the actual rifle, look at the comments. People say, hey, Mac, you're a little late to this conversation. The program's been canceled. No, it hasn't.
No.
It's not canceled. And I've confirmed this. It is not canceled.
Right.
So it's on life support. When you make a statement like that, back it up with your source. There's no source cited. Where's this information coming from? Now, I did some research on this Alan Orr guy, and he has a history of really tearing apart the NGSW program. So I don't know if the guy's ever handled one of the weapons. I don't think he has. I know he hasn't fired the 6.8 by 51 hybrid cartridge with the AP round. I know he hasn't. I've confirmed that that's considered classified information right now. The Army's not sharing information. There's no public release of information regarding its penetration capabilities, anything, and you cannot access it. I've even asked SIG if I can come to their facilities and shoot it, and they said, no, they can't do that. So you cannot gain access to this ammunition. And that'll come up later in the article. So anyway, it's claiming that the Joint Chiefs are now ramming the program through despite spectacularly failing multiple civilian sector peer reviews almost immediately upon commercial release. Now, I will give this author credit. He cites these peer reviews. Okay. He links to them in the article. One of them is the InRange TV video, which Carl takes the rifle, which I have here, takes a rifle, loads it, does what he's supposed to, closes the port cover, and fires it, and the gun works fine. Now, he doesn't do an extensive test. It's just a few rounds. Then he reloads the rifle, leaves the port cover open, lays it on the ground, puts gobs of chunky mud on the ejection port, fires it, and it malfunctions in one round. This is their peer review that they're citing. A gauntlet test, same thing that we do, and we tell people that watch the videos, this is not scientific. This is mostly for entertainment. Sure, you can glean some useful information from these types of tests, but it's not a definitive statement about the firearm's reliability.
Right.
Because you can't repeat that process in any scientific way. And I've often said I can take a pinch of sand and take the most reliable weapon you can think of and I can put that pinch of sand in a place I know where to put it. It's the Achilles heel of all self-loading firearms, and it will malfunction.
Mhm.
And all these guns work the same way. They have a big ejection port and a bolt that cycles inside. Now you can use direct gas impingement or internal pistons to move the bolt carrier system, or you can use a piston, but you're still moving a big bolt and carrier that has an open ejection port.
Right.
And a chamber of the exact same design.
Brass has to come out, new has to be loaded. I mean, that's
Right.
just a self-loading firearm. That's just how they function. You know,
Right.
There's always something. I've always said that mud test is like extreme.
Yes.
Like that is, you know, the amount of globby, soupy mud that he, you know, dumps on the gun is extreme. I mean, it really is. Most soldiers or anybody that's been in any type of military branch, one of the combat arms, if you will, what's the most important thing that we're toting around?
It's your rifle, man.
It's
It's
our
your
rifle.
life. Yeah.
It's our life. It's everything.
This is my rifle.
right?
There are many
So
like it.
I am not
But this one is
going to
mine.
be putting this gun in certain stuff that could potentially jam it up. I am going to put my body in that stuff and protect the rifle as best I can so that way it is ready to go when I need it to go. And one of the major things we did whenever we were leaving the fob and we got past the point where we can lock and load is lock and load, close the port cover.
Yep. That's
And
standard
that's
military
to
practice, US
prevent
military.
stuff from getting in that ejection port. And so, you know, because again, in most places, Afghanistan, Iraq, there is like this moon dust. It is just very, very fine dust. And this, you know, from the roadways and stuff, crunch, all this stuff. And it just kicks up because when I was going out on patrols, we were the last striker vehicle. So all that dust is blowing back towards us as we're continuing to drive. So I'm getting all the dust, and it would just coat my M4. And so at the end of the day, clean it all up, prepare for the next mission, you know?
Right.
And so that's the one thing that most people don't realize is in combat arms, you take care of your weapon. You're always keeping it clean. You're always keeping it ready to go.
That's
And
part of any
so-
first world military. That's
Right.
part of the training, should be. It is in our case.
And so most people aren't throwing the rifle into a giant soupy mud pit and stepping on it to cross the mud pit and then picking up the rifle and moving on. You know what I mean? That's just not what they're doing. And so I've always said that mud test is pretty extreme. And so, but again, it passed when the system is sealed like it's supposed to do. And then it jammed up because again, the speed of that carrier in there is very fast. And it's going to take that mud and it's going to, once it comes back, it's almost like it's hovering there in a brief moment. That carrier is already going home and tossing that mud into the chamber.
Yep. When you get big lumpy mud, now that's what's part of the reason why these tests aren't scientific. You have soupy mud, globby mud.
Mm-hmm.
There's no consistency
No.
in the mud used. And we try very diligently when we set up our gauntlet test to try to get that mud consistency the
Feel
exact
it
same.
and be like, yeah, it feels
Right.
the
Put a little
similar.
water in. Sometimes you get a little bit too much, gets a little soupier. It's really hard to regulate that.
Mhm.
Right. And it's one of the reasons why it's not scientific. But big globular mud, when you have big globs of mud hanging outside the ejection port, when that bolt carrier comes back, the mud can fall right into the gun.
Just the weight of the mud will
Right.
roll it right in there.
And then when it goes home, it pushes that mud in the chamber, and that's one of the Achilles heels of a self-loading firearm. That chamber, you get anything into that chamber, the gun's done. It's going down till you clean it.
because they got to be pretty tight.
Right.
You know, that's how
It doesn't matter if it's an AK, M16, M7, FAL, G36, 417, 416. Doesn't matter.
Right.
You get anything into that chamber, the gun is done.
Yep.
So, but we'll talk more about that because they get into the reliability issues
Absolutely.
of the gun. But that's one of the things they cite, and they link to the InRange TV video, very short video, couple rounds fired, and they cite that as a peer review that should have killed the program, they claim. So let's go a little further. They also say, indeed, it seems that the rifle's been cursed from birth. Even the naming has failed. Now, how does this have anything to do with the reliability, the availability of tungsten, the 6.8 high pressure cartridge? How does the naming failure have anything to do with the gun, right? When somebody writes an article like this and they throw that in there, it even failed in its namesake. That's just them trying to be controversial. That's them throwing shade on something because they have an agenda.
Mhm.
That's what it says to me. Now, if he has an agenda or not, I don't know. I'm speculating, but a statement like that tells me there's no basis for that statement in this that doesn't contribute to the discussion whatsoever other than just to degrade the rifle itself,
Right.
to put it in a bad light. So its naming has failed. Army recently allowed a third-party company, Colt and the M5, we talked about in that previous video, to scare off the military designation of M5. I found an article from January 18th of this year that they announced the renaming of the project to the M7. So they didn't step on Colt's toes with their
Right.
M5 rifle. And some people speculated they didn't choose M6 because of LWRC, right? So now it's the M7. Now, the name change, how does that affect the function of the weapon, the viability of the weapon in any way whatsoever?
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
Doesn't.
So the civilian testing programs have, or should have, sunk the program already. The XM57, they're slashing it, as it turns out, fails a single round into a mud test. Given the platform is piston-driven rifle, it now lacks gas, as the M16 was originally designed to blow away debris from the ejection port. Now, they claim that this is possibly done because they're trying to reduce the amount of gas to the shooter's face for, health reasons. But the statement that piston guns are inherently less reliable than direct gas impingement, what we call internal piston, because it's not a true DI gun, the M16, is pretty funny. So
it is.
They claim, they link to it. So go watch the video, right? And you'll see it's far from a formal test. It's just a fun, look what we're doing type of video. We've done them ourselves, right? So them saying that the in-range TV video of just a couple of rounds fired should have been enough to sink the M7 program is pretty funny.
Well, it sounded like he's saying that just piston systems in general are garbage or inferior
that's what he is saying.
to, DI. Yeah. And I think his idea is that DI would have blown that mud away from that port, because the excess gas coming out the, ports on the side of the carrier would have blown that mud away and pressurized the upper and blown everything away. And that's why it is, more superior. But as we look at current special operations firearms, the 416 piston,
right?
I believe the British L85, which is a giant pile of garbage, but that's not because of its piston system. It's
right.
for
It's
other
an AR-180
reasons,
in a bullpup fashion.
Right.
You have the G36, the Steyr AUG.
All these countries,
yeah,
piston systems, LMGs and things like that. Your 240 Bravos, your SAWs, your all this stuff.
Piston.
It's all piston systems.
Either long stroke or short stroke. Yep.
And so, piston systems are in multiple guns. And I would tell you most AR, enthusiasts out there, their unicorn gun is a 416. Oh, the greatest, most reliable thing on the planet. It's a piston system. So to say that it's inferior is completely incorrect.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you go back in time, just a few years to the early 2000s, what were people doing to the AR-15s? Converting them all to piston guns.
Oh my God, there was...
DI sucks. It poops where it eats. It's trash. Let's get rid of it. We got to go piston. That's the way of the future.
All the carbon that's building up in there is just going to kill the gun. I mean, we've got a BCM test where over 8,000 rounds.
Without a drop of oil, without wiping it down, nothing. And it works just fine. Yep.
Still going.
Because the guns like to run dry. But that's not the point. The point is them saying that this is absolute proof that gas piston guns are less reliable than direct gas impingement or internal piston like the M16 is pretty funny, because that's a complete change of statement from just a few years ago. And if you take a look at all the first world militaries, all of our allies, pretty much all the first world militaries in the world that isn't using the M16, that have developed or purchased other weapons for their militaries, almost all of them are piston guns.
Piston guns, yeah.
Now, I'm a big fan of DI. I love the M16. I do like the system. I've been talking about it for years. We have a test where I'm pouring dirt, handfuls of dirt into the ejection port of the gun with the barrel up, not getting it into the chamber. But I showed that if you keep the weapon dry in dirt and things like that, it's a pretty reliable system. A lot of firearms are. The only time it runs into problems is when you get dirt into the trigger system. That's true of the AK. That's true of the G30. That's true of any gun.
Chamber, trigger system, anything that requires to operate.
Right. Yep. So what's funny is they've just done this complete reversal in this article. And all of a sudden, the M16 has become the gold standard of reliability, not the AK. You know why? Because what happens to the AK when you take the safety off, open up that action, and you do the exact same thing? You press mud into the side of it.
Right.
It goes down. It stops because the mud gets behind the bolt carrier and limits its travel, slows its velocity, and the gun malfunctions. Yep. And so is the M16 more reliable than the AK? Maybe in certain tests. Yeah. I mean, I've had really good luck with it. I was really surprised in some of the testing I've done to the rifle over the years. But is it the gold standard? That's a pretty funny statement, given the fact that most of these articles and most of these people have spent their entire lives telling us that the M16 is trash and needs to be replaced. Now that we have a replacement for it, now the replacement's trash, the M16 is the gold standard. It's just funny to see this dynamic.
I know.
And so, look, I'm not saying that one is vastly superior to the other. We've experienced problems with both, but to say that the M16 is that gold standard is pretty funny. Okay, so let's see. All right. Civilian testing the Army either never did or is hiding, bold statement, where's your evidence? Also, only recently demonstrated that the rifle seemingly fails at point-blank ranges to meet its base criteria of penetrating level 4 armor unassisted. True, the Army never explicitly set this goal. Well, an admission of honesty there, because they didn't. But it is nonetheless insinuated at every level from the media to Congress that the rifle will penetrate said armor unassisted. Indeed, that was the entire point of the program, they claim. Of course, the rounds can penetrate body armor with armor-piercing rounds, but so can 7.62x51 NATO and 5.56x45. Interesting statement. So here he's admitting that the Army never really said that the weapon would do this, but it can do it. if it uses AP ammo. Duh.
Right.
You're going to penetrate armor without armor-piercing ammo? I mean, again, this just shows the bias in the article. Yes, he's saying it does penetrate. I personally don't know. I tried everything I could think of to get into a position where I could conduct a test with that ammunition.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not available. The Army considers it classified information.
Right.
So he doesn't know. Now, we will put the 7.62x51 NATO AP to the test. We're working on that video right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I also know, based upon what I've read, not because of anything I've been able to test myself, but the 5.56x45 NATO, just a standard M855, M855A1, will not defeat level 4 body armor.
Mm-hmm.
It just won't. We've hit level 4 body armor with 6.5 PRC. We've hit it with 338 Lapua. We've hit it with all sorts of really heavy hitting cartridges. Just using standard lead and copper jackets, we've never been able to defeat it.
I mean, we came pretty close, I want to say, but it didn't defeat it with that 22-250 on a 24-inch.
Yep.
With a 55 grain VMAX traveling
like
about
39.50.
Yeah. And it
still didn't make it.
Still didn't make it. And so now I would like to try a soft point or something. But again, we don't have those armor piercing capabilities like, steel or tungsten or some kind of penetrator in there, right?
Right.
Maybe if I had that, if I loaded in a 22-250, a penetrator round, now chances are I might be able to do it. As a matter of fact, I might actually load those up and see, unload some.
It'd be interesting to test.
Yeah. Unload some M855, which has a mild, penetrator in it and try that out. But again, one of the things with this cartridge, and I mean, maybe we'll get to it here, is it's not necessarily, it's the technology in the cartridge, which I think is important moving forward in advancing the military's small arms. It's that bimetal cartridge. It's the ability for it to get the pressures that it can to get that velocity out of a short barrel that would require a 24 or 26 inch barrel to meet.
That's the point that we're going to have to make here.
Right.
Right. So he's mixing things up. The cartridge, the hybrid cartridge at the higher pressures, is intended to accelerate the bullet to 3,000 feet per second. 135 grain bullet, if I've read correctly, to 3,000 feet per second. Now that can be accomplished with other cartridges.
Yeah.
But not out of a 13.5 inch barrel.
No.
That's the point. It's supposed to get that bullet to 3,000 feet per second for lethality out of a short barrel.
Yep.
Right? And then when using AP, it's supposed to be able to penetrate armor. But we don't know the results of that test because that information is classified.
Right.
So making bold statements about how it's failed, unless he has a source he's not citing, it's just purely made up.
When you say that it's the 6.8, I know in his article there, he's basically talking about how the 6.8 by 51 is just basically useless because the 7.62 by 51
can do the
is
same
just
thing.
A few hundred feet per second slower. You're only gaining a few hundred feet per second. He's not looking at the fact that gain of 200 feet per second out of the 6.8 by 51 is being done in a 13.5 inch barrel.
Versus a 20 or 18.
Versus, right, a 20, an 18, a 24, a 26. It requires barrel lengths and some of these other things to get to those velocities.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And the military is looking for a shorter, handier.
Right. What do most
weapon.
people guys, running and all this other stuff? That everybody's always running some kind of CQB setup. You know what I mean? A Mark 18, with a 10.3 or 10.5 barrel or 11.5 or 12.5 or whatever. Especially with 5.56, to get the true performance out of 5.56, your M193s, all these other rounds that they have, you need a 20-inch barrel. That's what it was designed for. And then as you continue to chop to these 10.3s, you're making the 5.56 anemic.
What do you think the M855A1 was supposed to do?
Right.
It was supposed to get the velocities back up through higher pressures because it operates at 10,000 PSI higher pressures than the standard M855.
Right. So it was designed to get the bullet faster out of a 14.5-inch barrel.
Right.
Versus the 20. So they could get the 20-inch speeds and velocities out of a carbine. Right. And so that to me is the future, is these bimetal, heavy, high pressure cartridges. So you can get that velocity in a short barrel.
Right.
And that's what I believe is the true future of this cartridge.
I agree. I think it's the true future of all cartridges. This is the last step in gunpowder evolution. We've gone 100 years without any real innovation with gunpowder. We've been using brass cases, gunpowder, lead bullets, copper jackets forever. Yeah, we stick in some tungsten penetrators, some steel penetrators. We've done all that, but there's not really been a true step forward in the technology in the last 100 years. This is the last step before we go on to different weapon systems, I think.
Yeah.
There's not much else we can do with gunpowder. So they've bumped that pressure up to get the velocities up out of shorter barrels. what the Army's playing with here is the future. Now, it may not be the 6.8 by 51 or 6.8 by 51.
Right.
We don't know that. And I'm not defending the 6.8 by 51. I know nothing about it. I've tried everything I can think of to get my hands on it.
I know.
And I can't. What I'm saying is, let's not go out there and make these grandiose statements, not cite sources, get everybody all spun up, the M7's trash, when you honestly don't know. I'm not defending the weapon. Now, we just recently got our hands on the rifle, right? I didn't know in our earlier videos. We said, don't understand the gun, don't understand the ammo. Look forward to finding out more.
Right.
And we shared our thoughts, right? And there's certain valid concerns with the M7. The fact that it's a big bore battle rifle with higher pressures, more recoil, that will be a problem for our military in training. It will be. That's known. That's just based on historical evidence, right? When the FBI went to 10 millimeter, their qualification scores plummeted. When the military goes to this, qualification scores are going to plummet unless training rises to meet the occasion, right? Because it does present, there's no free lunch in physics, right? If you're going to get a heavy bullet moving fast, you're going to deal with heavier recoil. If you want a lighter bullet moving fast, you can deal with less recoil and lighter weapons, but you're going to sacrifice lethality on the other end of the muzzle. So there's no free lunch. And so they will have problems to deal with this weapon. And I'm not sure I understand the Army's desire to do it, but let's take a look at some numbers. So I did find a source, publicly available source. And it says that the Army has appropriated funds for 17,122 XM7 rifles, 1,419 XM250 weapons, and then 14,932 XM157 optics. That's the optic from Vortec that they're talking about putting on the gun, which this article also goes into. So by those numbers, you're talking 14,000 weapons. That's not replacing the M4 in military service.
Special forces type numbers.
That sounds like, which is something we talked about in our earlier video. Right. We said, are they really going to replace the M4? We suspect the M4 is going to hang around for a while. And it would appear, based on those numbers for the next fiscal year, that that is indeed the case. That this weapon isn't going to be a mainline infantry weapon. Makes sense. It's going to be a slowly adopted system as they test it, find out if they really want it, and they may not adopt it in 10 years, 5 years, 2 years. They may just keep it in special operations, kind of like the SCAR 17.
Exactly. The SCAR 17 started that same way of like replacing all this stuff and it ended up just being in special operations. And then it fizzled. You know what I mean? And now...
Well, we're looking at this.
Exactly. Now this is the new little hot ticket item. You know, and so now we're looking at this. And so again, the special forces guys will be the ones to get this in their hands and run with it. And we'll definitely get real world experience because those guys go all over the world.
In every type of environment.
Exactly. Every type of environment. And they'll be able to tell and report what these guns are doing. And that's when we're going to see, you know, its true capabilities and all that stuff.
I mean, if it's like the 75th Rangers that picked up the SCAR 16 and they took it to the field for a short time, they came back, said, give us our M4s back. If that happens with the M7, then we'll know.
Exactly.
Right? We'll let the military decide that. The units will decide that. But this whole article is pure speculation. It's acting as if though it's stating fact, but it's not, because they don't cite any sources for this information other than YouTube videos. It gets better.
Oh, I know. It gets better on some of this stuff.
So the fundamental problem with the program is there remains not enough tungsten available from China, as Army knows, to make the goal of making every round armor piercing even remotely feasible. Now, the Army's never stated that it intended to make every single round armor piercing. It never has stated that, right? Matter of fact, the Army well knows, because tungsten's nothing new. Tungsten has been used in armor penetrators for quite some time. As a matter of fact, the Army is already working on adopting another 7.62 by 51, 308. We'll call it 308 because 7.62 by 51, 6.8 by 51 can be confusing to some folks. So they've already adopted the M1158 armor piercing round, which uses a tungsten penetrator, which I think Alan Orr, the author of this article, is citing as being able to defeat level 4 body armor. Can't get the ammo, right? We don't know. There's no YouTube videos out there on it because you can't get your hands on it. It's just like the 6.8 by 51 AP stuff. Can't get your hands on it yet.
In his peer review that on here, this article that he cited, I believe, was a YouTuber that had shot a level 4 plate with 277 Fury using the bimetal case, but it had a
Sierra Match King.
Sierra Match King.
Not an AP.
That's not an AP round. That's not going to punch through level 4.
And Alabama Arsenal addresses that in his video. He actually says...
that's who it was. Okay.
Yeah.
Alabama. Okay.
They link to it in the article.
Okay.
And just like the InRange link. It links to a video that isn't damning in the slightest. But they extrapolate it into, this should have ended the program in the article. And if you watch the video, which we'll link to the article down below and you can follow the link and check out Alabama Arsenal's video, But he says, like at around the 530 mark in the video, yeah, if we would have had the AP ammo, likely the testing would have changed completely.
Exactly.
Right? So this guy's flip-flopping back and forth. They never claimed that it was supposed to defeat armor, but it can defeat armor.
Mhm.
They didn't claim it, but it can, but only if you use the AP ammo, and you can't get the AP ammo because tungsten's unavailable. Not true. Is it limited? Is it mostly, is China the largest source? Absolutely.
That's what he's saying. We're going to get tungsten from China, which they're also going to use that tungsten to shoot at us during World War III, I want to say.
They're going to cut us off. Yeah.
Right.
It goes way down that rabbit hole.
But yeah, you know, there's other penetrators out there that can be manufactured and whatnot other than tungsten that the military can use. I know in the United States, if there's one thing we can be good at, not right now, but we can be good at, is coming together. You know, all the wars that we've been in, World War II, everybody stepped up and was turning in scrap metal to scrap yards, and they were turning it into all sorts of arms and stuff like that. The American people can come together and do amazing things. You know, I remember 9/11, you know, the amount of people that got together was awesome. You know, and so if we were ever attacked or something like that, I believe people would come together and we could find and source whatever we would need to be able to source.
But even then, is it really a necessity?
Well, you know, and that's the thing. He's saying that that's like the only thing. That's the, oh my God, it needs, you know, this tungsten or else it's over. It's like, not necessarily.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I said, there's other penetrators out there.
Right. And there's other materials that can be used.
Right.
But they're not going to explore that because the Army's not saying that we're going to make every round an AP round.
Right.
That's never been part of the requirements.
Right.
It's no different than every 308 round isn't going to be an M1158 round. It's just an inventory in case they need it.
Exactly.
So again, it's coming at an angle of dishonesty, and it's trying to paint this bleak picture like the weapon doesn't work without the ammo. Well, no, they got the high pressure ammo that can accelerate the bullet to the appropriate velocities for extended range and lethality. That's one issue. Then you have the AP, which addresses a different issue.
Mm-hmm.
They're not, you know, they're not tied together. They're two separate mission specs.
Right.
Right. So he's conflating all this information and presenting it in the worst possible light. And that I found that to be really striking. The way this article is written, it just seems like a hit piece. Yeah. And we're typically very critical. I mean, we were, I wouldn't say we were critical, but we were kind of like, let's wait and see with the M7. Let's see what this is all about.
Yeah.
And we kind of explored some options, like what might or might not happen and how it may be used and not used. And so we're taking a more cautious approach because we have about the same amount of information this guy has, apparently, which isn't much.
Right.
So, and that's just it. I'm not defending the M7. I'm just taking a look at this article and saying this is not objective journalism at all.
I mean,
this
what
is
I
a
can
hit
tell
piece.
you about this rifle after shooting it, I was like, and experienced shooters like, you know, you and I and others that are out there, you could pick up this rifle and do amazing things with it. But like you said, to new recruits or somebody who's never touched a rifle, they will suffer with this thing. Absolutely. Because there's much more kick. Now with the suppressor on there, they've taken that blast down quite a bit, which is nice, you know, but there is a lot more recoil to it. And so, you know, some folks are going to maybe yank in the trigger, things like that, just to get that shot over with, you know what I mean? And so they're going to have to, you know, look at that. And again, this is all building on a process. You know what I mean? They start, they introduce, they got small numbers, goes to these guys tests it and all this other stuff. You know what I mean? They're putting these guns, it sounds like, first in the hands of operators, which are well-tuned machines. You know what I mean? In terms of multiple things, not just firearms, but multiple things. And so it's quite interesting to see what's going to come of it. But again, like you say, in the article, it's just basically, it's on mechanical life support. So.
Yeah, it's dead. And that's what's so funny is the people have taken this article as a basis for all their videos and posts and stuff like that, and just completely went even further than this article goes in terms of, oh, it's a dead program. We can't get any tungsten. You'll never be able to get the ammo. It's just like, wow, man. All one article caused this big explosion on the internet of misinformation.
Right.
And maybe some of it may not be misinformation. We just don't know, I guess is my point. So looking at this article objectively, trying to figure out what's actually going on, this article is useless. All this does is just get people riled up over nothing.
Right.
So it'd be different if they cited some sources. Let's see. Okay, so we've already addressed, I'm not going to get too much more into the whole tungsten thing because they go on for quite some time about how tungsten and World War III and China's going to cut us off and all this other stuff, but that doesn't mean the weapon is useless without it. That's such a stretch.
As we know with plates, I mean, as we've shot plates before, as soon as you shoot a plate, generally in a plate, you've got that ceramic that's on there that's going to take that initial hit, spread that hit throughout the plate, and then the material behind it is going to catch any fragments or things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
once it's been shot in that one spot, if you get another bullet on top of that,
It's
going
compromised.
through.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It may stop it, but it's compromised. You know what I mean? So like you say, penetrator isn't necessarily a necessity.
Right.
So
he goes on to talk about the slight increase in ballistic coefficient between the 6.8 and the 308 cartridges is neither justified, the money pumped into the program, nor does it, or does the slight increase in kinetic energy dumped on target. So he's saying that it doesn't make sense, that the 308's just as good, right? But keep in mind, the 308 needs more barrel.
that's
And
where
he's missing the point, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
The 6.8 by 51 is supposed to operate in shorter barrels, giving you that lethality that you would have out of a 308 with a 20-inch barrel.
Right.
But you're getting it from a compact weapon,
Yes.
right? So again, he's missing the point. I don't know if it's on purpose or if it's just, incompetence on his part, not understanding the whole picture here. So let's see, going through this, it goes on for quite some time talking about the 308 and how it's just as good. That this really brings nothing to the table, which is absolutely false, as we've discussed already. Let's see. And then he talks about the Army doing crazy stuff, which this has merit, right? So he said that the Army basically has been acting schizophrenically because of the war in Afghanistan and Iraq and extended ranges and our troops getting worn out by the PKM and stuff like that, that we needed to extend the range and lethality of our small arms. And therefore, this is an overmatch situation that they refer to. It's overkill, overmatch, that we're going past what's really necessary to achieve range and lethality by adopting such a weapon system. And then he goes into talking about how, the Army bought the M110, they bought the CSAS rifle, they did the SCAR, they've just been, and then they brought back the M14 and was putting it in EBR stocks and all sorts of crazy stuff, just, frantically trying to address the issue of not being able to engage threats at range in wide open spaces between canyons, right, in Afghanistan. So that's really interesting, but it's also a true statement. The Army did seem a little bit weird in that it was just adopting everything it could find.
Oh, yes, they
right?
did.
We had the M110, they get the M110A1, which is the HK rifle, the CSAS. They just keep buying new rifles and using them in DMR roles.
Yes,
and
I remember in 2005 when I was in Mosul, they came with a pallet of M14s that showed up. And we, on my team, got to go and have like first pick of them because our commander told them about it. And then after that, they were being divvied out because that's when DMRs were coming on scene, right? So a DMR is a very new concept in 2005. So they were putting one, I believe, in each team or each squad or something like that. There was a DMR. And so they brought out these all different painted schemes, all different stocks, all different.
They basically grabbed a bunch of drill rifles and then brought them back to the field.
All this craziness that was just basically laying on a pallet. You know what I mean? And we had to essentially grab from these and put scopes on them and start using them as DMR rifles until they came up with a solution.
Did they have the selector switch in them, or were they just semi-auto only?
No, semi-auto.
See, that's something that the military did back in the day.
Yeah.
I wonder if they're going to do it with the M7.
Trust me, I would have played with selector switch if it had it, but it didn't. These were all semi-auto, like Springfield, just, M14s. And I remember mine had it was like a maroon purple, deep purple stock almost with FDE paint on it. And it was a polymer stock. And it was just, I ended up putting an EOTech on it and creating a battle rifle out of the thing because that's what I wanted. So that's why I say a rifle like this, I would have, you would have handed me that in 2005. I'd have been like, oh yeah.
But this rifle is going to have the same issues the M14 did back in,
sure.
in the Vietnam era, because you put that thing on full auto, it's going to be very hard for a green troop to be able to control it.
Yeah.
Right? That's where the M16 is going to shine. But keep in mind, this weapon in our military is being trained to fire semi-automatic, right? And you can even do cover fire with semi-automatic. You don't need a giggle switch, right? It's nice to have in a military weapon just in case, but most military doctrine states it's not to be used unless in very specific circumstances.
I never flicked the switch. Our M4s had burst. They were not auto.
Right.
And not one time can I remember ever clicking over to the burst mode. Not once. It was always semi.
People say, would you swap your AR-15 for an M16 and a shiznit hits the fan situation if you find one? Like, no, I'll just keep the rifle I know and I'm familiar with.
Right.
I don't need full auto. I'm more lethal with semi-auto.
Right.
Because I'm not going to waste ammunition. And that's going to be even more important with the M7 because the increased weight of the ammunition and the reduced combat load in terms of volume of ammunition, you're going to have to practice fire control with it.
Yeah.
More so than the M16.
You don't
the
want
spray
to
and pray days are over.
All your mags and all of a sudden go,
ruh-roh.
uh-oh.
Right.
You have to be, keeping in mind what you're using and what you have and what you can get. You know what I mean? While
Right.
you're in any one of these situations, because you're either closing with and destroying, or you're, bounding out of there and then coming up with a different plan. You know
Right.
what I mean? So there's all sorts of stuff. But anyway.
The next article talks about the Vortex XM157 sight. I don't want to get too far into this. You and I both had questions about this optic.
Yeah, because
Never played with it.
Never played one. I've never seen one. I don't know what its capabilities are, but what it sounds like is the thing basically has integrated, range finding, and then basically it gives you a ballistic, solution, and then you basically hold it on that solution and fire.
It's probably like the SIG BDX system we've played with, where you
Right.
just laser target, it communicates that data to the site, adjust a little red fire dot within the reticle, gives you your hold, doesn't give you wind calls, doesn't give you, but and he talks about things like, it has that ranging capability. It takes, valuable seconds to range a target to get that ballistic solution, which is true.
Mhm.
It does.
It does take
If you got
seconds.
somebody that just popped up and ran somewhere, you're not going to laze them, get a distance and engage. You're just going to have to engage.
Right.
Right. You're going to have to learn your weapon. But this is a crutch that, again, goes back to the modern warfighter, has become too dependent on technology.
Right.
You take a look at the modern sniping systems. They're all based on computers. Back in the day, they had to do all that math in their head.
Yeah, we had a calculation actually. We would have our mil-dot scope,
Mhm.
and you would basically utilize I remember in the school, we would measure certain targets. We would measure people, we would measure the truck, we would measure all these different things. And those measurements came into role on, where you would hold in your mil-dot scope, or even dialing your BDC. And you could range estimate utilizing your mil-dots in the scope. And there was calculations. You had eyes, binos, scope is what you would do. You would range estimate with your eyes, range estimate with your binos, range estimate with your scope, and you had to be within a certain margin of error to, pass the test, if you will.
Mhm.
But that's what we had to do. We had calculations that we had to keep in our book,
Right.
if you will, your dope books and things like that. And that's the idea of a dope book, is not necessarily like a infantryman's, thing. It's more of a sniper thing, if you will. But you have data of previous engagements, so that way you can open your book. You have all these distances and all this stuff. You create a range card in your hide, so that way you've already established distances. So if a target shows up next to this landmark that you have drawn on your range card, you just look at your range card and
Now you know you're dope.
boom,
Right.
And so there's a lot of stuff that goes on when you're setting up. It's not Hollywood. You're not walking in just knowing everything. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
So the guy brings up points about the XM157. I know it's big, looks to be heavy. I know it's ridiculously expensive, and it has limited functionality.
Mhm.
And then he goes so far as to say that, it's likely made in China, at least components thereof. Again, speculating. He doesn't know. He
I wonder
says
if he thinks there'll be
likely.
a turn-off switch in there or something. So when we go World
Whatever.
War III, China can hit a
Just
thing
turn
and
us off.
turn the scopes off.
So, but I don't want to get into the XM157. I don't know anything about it. I probably never have one, given the cost of it.
Mhm.
And then the article just kind of winds up, starting from highly dubious intellectual, strategic, and tactical baseline. The NGSW program is now failing mechanically and ballistically at once. Based on what? Again, he keeps making these assertions, but doesn't cite sources, just feelings. And so that's pretty much the article. And it's just mind-boggling to me that this article was taken and extrapolated into all the information that's now out there dominating the internet, on YouTube videos, forum
Yeah,
posts,
YouTube
blog
videos,
posts.
everything. It's calling this dead.
Yeah, it's dead. It's done. It's trash. We can't even get the ammo for it. The Army's bailed on it. None of that is true.
You wouldn't believe how many
None of
people
that's true.
rah-rah on the 5.7, and you can't get the real 5.7 ammo even to this day.
Right.
So,
Right.
But yet everybody's rah-rahs about the 5.7.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's no different. The real ammunition that's going to do the real damage and the real armor piercing is something that you're probably never going to get. or
Army's going to
see.
hold on to that.
That is one of the things they've always done.
Yep.
You know what I mean? You're always going to get the either low-powered or underpowered stuff. And as a commercial market, that's just what you're going to see, And so that doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
So
I guess the moral of this story, folks, is just don't get wound up with everything that you read. This article, in my opinion, is clearly a hit piece.
Mhm.
It's based on conjecture, speculation, and an apparent bias against the NGSW program. And look, I get it. As I said, we've had our own questions about it, but I'm not going to go out there and make grandiose statements like this.
This reminds me, I remember I gave you, and it's actually hanging up in the office, an Army Times article on the M17, because I still get like the papers and stuff like that. I still kind of keep up with all that. And I remember getting that, and it's hanging up in the office. I'll have to look back and see if it's the same author from that, and two, if it's like a hit piece.
Well, he does have a history. I went back and looked at some of his other articles, and he's had a very negative view of the program since the beginning.
Yeah.
And again, especially in those early articles, I know he didn't get his hands on the weapon. And I doubt he had his hands on the weapon when he wrote this article, because he keeps citing YouTube sources.
Right.
I mean, come on, I make YouTube videos. I get it. I mean, we try our best to make good content, right? And factual content. But you can't cite our videos, especially our gauntlet test videos, as evidence of some, failure of the weapon systems that we show on our channel. It's just whatever. It's kind of comical, but at the same time, it's typical. Because throughout my entire life, when I was a young man, a kid, the M16 was trash. It failed miserably in Vietnam. It was a poodle cartridge. The gun was unreliable. It was a Mattel toy. Trash, 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 trash. Fast forward to 2023, Alan Orr writes an article, and the M16 is now the gold standard for reliability. And now the new M7's trash, right? Based on his limited understanding of gas piston guns.
Right. There's always evolutions and changes to weapon systems that we don't know about. Same with I remember the MPX when we put it through the gauntlet and it choked in the water, and we're like, what? And then SIG's like, oh, we fixed that.
Right.
And we're like, when? There's no indication.
This gun was new
when,
to
right?
me.
And then we got a new one, and sure enough, they did.
They sent another one. They did fix it.
And so it was one of those things that, like, this is going to be the same thing. There's going to be changes. There's going to be
this weapon's not done.
And change and eventually what could become the greatest weapon system ever made.
And here's the other thing, and you and I have said this, and I still think this is a valid point. It's speculation, but this rifle in 6.8 is obviously we're dealing with a cartridge that people don't know anything about. So we have 308 and we have AP 308 rounds. There's a good chance at this weapon, because it's just a simple barrel and bolt swap away from being a 308, a NATO standard. So what's the likelihood that you'll have the 6.8 based upon mission requirements, and then you'll have 308 rifles in inventory based on mission requirements?
Exactly.
Using NATO cartridges with NATO compatibility, because the magazine that both of them use are identical.
Yep.
This feeds 6.8 by 51 and 308.
The bolt's the same.
Well, dimensionally, we did measurements of the heads and stuff like that, but SIG does say that there is a bolt change required. Okay. So I think it's probably metallurgical in terms of durability, because of the higher pressures.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I think they're probably at different heat treating to the lugs and things like that. But the heads within,
that makes sense.
Less than 1,000.
If you're dealing with those higher pressures, you'd want the bolt to be stronger,
right?
Because they stay in those lugs and all that other stuff. So yes, that does make sense.
So it's just a bolt and barrel swap to get it to 308. So that maybe we'll see that happen.
Right.
I don't think it's going away. If anything, it's just going to have a limited use.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at that, 14,000 number, it seems to signal that the Army has never intended to truly replace the M4, not at least in the short term, until they fully vet the weapon system.
Exactly.
And it looks like they're going through the process of vetting. So, what is that process? Well, first you go to Aberdeen and stuff like that. You start testing it, then you send it out to limited troops. They'll take it into the field, they'll test it, and then say, we think this thing has merit. So then they'll order 14,000 units. And then they'll put those in the hands of special operations and people that are going to use them to the extent of their capabilities. And then they're going to decide, this thing may work as a standard infantry rifle, or it's better served as a DMR, or it's better served for mission-specific type applications and not as a standard infantry rifle.
Mm-hmm.
And who knows, maybe this technology of the higher pressure cartridges will work its way into the 308, into the 5.56 and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, because that seems to be the future. So maybe this in conjunction with something like that in the future is the solution. We don't know.
Could you imagine?
I couldn't go out and write an article and say definitively, this is dead, this is the future, bow down because I know everything. I can't cite a single source.
Could you imagine super form or, creating that bimetal cartridge in 5.56 or something?
Oh, that'd be amazing.
Cranking up those pressures to insane thing. Imagine what that little varmint bullet can do then. But then also we've also tested this and seen this as well. Sometimes you increase that pressure and performance out of short barrels. If the bullet technology doesn't match the cartridge and powder technology, you might speed bullets and they'll just shatter as soon as they hit something.
45 Super video, check it out.
Exactly.
Yeah, we ran into
45 Super, where it sounds really awesome on paper, but once we actually fired it at the gel, it only went in like 4 inches because it literally just
exploded.
The bullet exploded. It
flattened out like a pancake, cut sideways, and
it couldn't take those pressures.
Right. Or velocities. So but they're purposely designing bullets for this, and it's not doing anything spectacular, right? What it's doing, as we've already said, it isn't achieving some crazy velocity. It's just reaching standard velocities out of shorter barrels.
Right.
And he completely misses that in this article.
That's what a lot of people want to see. Nobody wants to be swinging around a giant musket
Right.
They want to swing around this nice little compact package that
I want 6.5
rips.
PRC performance out of that rifle.
Oh my
And that's what the
God.
6.8 does.
That would be, that's awesome.
Right.
Because 6.5 PRC is amazing, but it requires like a 26-inch barrel to do it.
Right. And this
So-
requires a 13.5-inch barrel to do the same thing, with the
Right.
exact same bullet weight. That's why we used a 6.5 PRC in our armor testing. We didn't have AP rounds. We just wanted to see if there was something magic about that bullet weight and that velocity. We kind of knew what was going to happen
It
because
put
we've already
some
shot
hurt on that armor,
It
but
did.
it didn't go through.
didn't go through. You're going to know you got hit, but it isn't going to kill you.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I just thought that was interesting. I felt really strong about doing this video because I read this article, and I'm still undecided on the weapon and the ammunition. I'm trying to learn as much as I can, but I read this article with these definitive statements. I was just like, dude, this is just trash. This is, and sure enough, the internet always globs onto the negativity and then takes it and makes it even worse. You know, it's on mechanical life support here, but on the internet, it's dead already. It's been canceled, Mac. You're late to the show. Wow.
Right.
But that's just how the internet works. So, you know, if you guys are concerned about the M7, just sit back and watch. The military is testing this thing out. We don't know where this is going to go. I don't know if the weapon's going to be finally adopted as a standard infantry rifle. We just don't know. But you can't take articles like this to heart.
No.
This is pure entertainment. This has no fact to it that I can find anyway, at least in my opinion. All right, with that being said, folks, thank you for watching. If you would like to support us here at the Military Arms Channel so we can continue to bring you content like this, please consider becoming part of our Patreon family. There's a link to this down below. Also, swing by, check out Second Legacy. Also, right here on YouTube, you got the little join button underneath the video player you're watching right now, and a thanks button. You can mash either one of those buttons and support us right here on YouTube in the age of demonetization. Last but not least, thank you for 15 years of support, and check out Copper Custom. With that being said, we'll talk to you guys soon.
Take care, guys.